Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the FSF podcast. I'm Tim. I'm your host. I want to remind you that this is the show made by nerds for nerds. And our guest today is a long time, well, over 40 years actually, penciler and artist for for Marvel, for DC Comics, working on characters like Thor, Iron Man, those pesky Avengers, just to name a few. He's also the co-creator of characters who are highlighted on the Netflix Marvel shows. Some of my favorite shows: Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders. He worked on all of those, and I'm excited to welcome a fellow Michigan man, Arvell Jones, to the FSF podcast. Welcome to the show, Arvell.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've met you a couple different times at the Monroe Comic Con, just outside of Detroit, and it's always a good time there. And we've been wanting to get you on the show for about a year or so, and I think it was last year or the year before last, you gave me your email address, said, yeah, reach out to me. I'll be on the show. And then I promptly lost your email and had to wait a whole nother year to see you again to get it. But we got it, and you're here, and so I'm excited to have you. One of the things we talked about at the Monroe Comic Con, you were gracious enough to sit down at a panel with us. But for those who weren't at the panel, they may have missed out on a little bit of this story. We talked about your origin and how you got going in the comic world. So if you don't mind, would you mind walking us through a little bit of that? How did you get started as a penciler, as an artist? And, how did you get from there to here, kind of?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll summarize it first, and then if you want more details, we can go into
Sure.
it. The King of Comics, Jack Kirby, called me and told me I can do this business, that I could be in the business. That's
That'll
that's
do.
the head. Yeah, it started when I was about 13 years old, I guess is when that call took place. My father handed me the phone and said, some guy named Jack is on the phone to talk to you. And I said, oh, that wasn't a word though. That was like, but that's what I did. And I got on the phone. Well, actually, I said, Jack who? I don't know any Jacks. And then when I heard his voice on the phone and he said, this is Jack Kirby, then I went.
Right, right.
And he said, hello. And I said, hi, Jack. I sent a package to Marvel uh, in care of Jack Kirby, or Marvel Kirby in care of, yeah. I sent a package,
Sure.
and he took it upon himself to call me long distance. He hadn't been long moved from New York to Thousand Oaks, and so getting a long distance call back then, for you youngins, used to cost a heck of a lot of money.
Yes, it did.
You got charged by the minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, me freaking out for the first minute was costing him money. But he stayed on the phone. Yeah. And the work I sent, he said, yo, you clearly can do this business, If you wanted to be work for Marvel or DC, yeah, just, send your stuff back to, and he told me who to send it to. And who I don't remember at the moment. I think it was Sal Brodsky, but it, wasn't John Purporton. But anyway, at 13, I didn't think I was ready, even though Jack told me I was ready. So I took another year or two before I started submitting stuff, because I could have just maybe sent something right away and say, I just got off the phone with Jack and he said you should hire me. But I didn't do that.
Right.
uh, he did say, keep working on it and you can work at Marvel. So I just figured I need to work on it a little longer. So that's the short of it. The longer story, if you're interested,
Sure.
included meeting, starting to meet other people in the Detroit area who also wanted to work in comics. And back then there were no, YouTube videos and
Mm-hmm.
no, art studios, and comics was
Right.
considered a bastard industry. And you know maybe I should stop talking to your audience like they're 5-year-olds, but just in case they are. We didn't
Well,
have any of that
I
back
act like a 5-year-old. Does that count?
well, sometimes.
Okay,
We'll
let's
see.
see.
um, and so I went on a quest at that point to get into Marvel. And locally, we had a bookstore. It was called Abelman's Bookstore. And because there were no comic book stores back then either. And you could go there and buy used comics, and they had a spinner rack, and I bought my comics off the spinner racks there and about 5 or 6 other locations. So I had a pretty good collection going. But I just wanted to get into the business. I didn't want to work for Chrysler, Ford, GM, or American Motors, if anybody's that old.
I'm that old. I remember American
Okay.
Motors.
And that was, in my neighborhood at least, how a decent person made a decent living.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, some people weren't decent and they made livings in other ways, but that was the only ways my parents would consider. Besides, and my father was somewhat of an artist, and he just never really took it anywhere. He could do some interesting little portraits and some cartoons and things like that, which were fun. But so he was very supportive and fun. You said I could say funded. He funded my schemes to to get into the business, and he took me to the New York Comic Con. He took me to the Detroit Triple Fan Fair. Maybe I should have did that the other way around. The Detroit Triple Fan Fair, and then the New York Comic Con, and uh, which were the only conventions that happened. And that didn't really start happening until I was maybe about 15. Uh, and I tried to meet as many professionals as possible. But by working at Abelman's bookstore, I would go there first as a customer, and then one day I asked Tom Altshuler, who was the owner at the time, uh, could I do anything so I could get more comics? So he said, I need signs for my shelving. And do you do calligraphy? I said, yes, I do. And so I started doing calligraphy for all the shelves. So I was in there on almost every Saturday, keeping an eye out for any cool old books that would come in. And also, sometimes I would help uh, Tom even bring them in because he'd go do an estate sale or something,
Hmm.
big box in, and I'd help him bring it in if it had comics in it. If it didn't have comics in it, he could handle it himself. And I would go through them and pull. And then one day, this tall guy comes walking in because I had a nice stack, like way up high, like at 13, 14 years old. I'd keep them over everybody's heads, out of sight of all the customers. But this tall guy comes walking in, walks right up to the shelf where I'm at, and starts flipping through, from my point of view, flipping through the books. And I'm looking up at him, looking at the books, and I'm going, "Hey, those aren't for sale." And he looked around and said, "This is a bookstore, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a bookstore." He said, "And you sell books here, right?" He said, "Yeah." "And you work for the bookstore?" I said, "Yeah, but those aren't for sale." And he says, "Well, who are you?" I said, "Well, I kind of work here." He said, "Where's your boss?" I said, "He's up at the cash register." He said, "I'm going to talk to him." I said, "No, don't go talk." He went and talked to him and took my Secret Life of Private Strong with Jack Kirby and Wally Wood. Took a Fantastic Four. I think it was Fantastic Four number 10. Why would I remember that? Maybe it wasn't 10. But anyway, sounds good for the story. It was an early copy. And,
Right.
he was just grabbing some of the stuff. And, so I went and talked to Tom, and Tom sold it to him because he was giving him cash. And I'm working and saving for this stuff, and I'm getting nothing. And so Tom said, there's more stuff coming in. Don't you got your pick of the litter. You just have to put them away. I said, I did put them away, and he took them. So he gave me a bag to put everything in. Wasn't big enough, but I started putting the stuff in the bag, and then he gave me an area where I could put them so that the customers wouldn't see it. But during that time, so I met Rich. That's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about Fantastic Four #10 or Private Life, Private Strong. I still have bad memories about that. Uh, yeah, I'm not gonna have a breakdown, but I spent a lot of time, doing. Okay, all right. Let me get back on track. Okay, so you might have to cut some of this out because this is emotional right here. I worked like all summer for these books.
Right?
He just walks in and takes them. But
Because he could reach him and walks out with him. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, only because he was tall enough, you know.
Right?
But anyway, but we got to talking because he kept coming back in to see if he could see some more stuff, and I made sure there would be nothing for him to see, And then he started coming on other days when I wasn't there. But I had, I had a stash pile, and Tom made sure he didn't sell those. All right, I'm over it. Anyway, so me and Rich was became like best known as the creator of Deathlock at Marvel, and
Okay.
but we started talking. I started showing him my work. He was much better than I was, but he kept encouraging me. He actually took some of my work and inked it, and it looked really good when he inked it. I did a Black
Nice.
Panther stalking in the jungle, and he inked it, and I said, well, what do you think? He said, it's pretty good. I said, well, why'd you sign it Dixon? Your name is Buckler. He said, well, I don't want to take the glory away from you. And I was like, no, take the glory. Put your name on it. He said, no, I'm not going to put my name on it. So he would label stuff Dixon for a while. And I started a fanzine around the same time because I was starting to get all these old books, and I would write up about them, and then and that started attracting other people, and they would come to the bookstore, and I would talk to them. People like Jim Starlin and Al Milgram and Tom Orzechowski, and
Mm-hmm.
well, Terry Austin came later, but a whole bunch of people, about 15 of us, and we sort of would get together on Saturdays and show each other our work and give each other hard criticism, see if we can make each other cry. That was sort of the thing. Show your work. People could say as much nasty stuff as they wanted to, as long as they didn't tear it up or throw it away or anything like that. They would do that. They
Okay.
would, and we started a newsletter, and we would send the newsletter out and around, and we kept meeting people. Ken Stacy. I can't think of everybody's name, but it was just a bunch of people that lived in and around Detroit. Ken Stacy was somewhere between Detroit and Toronto, but every once in a while he'd show up at our meetings. And Mike Vosberg,
Mm-hmm.
lived in walking distance from my house, so he would come by my parents' house. Yeah, my father always said, "This is not your house. You can leave at any time." But
Right?
I would bring all these strangers by, and he would tolerate it. So yeah, so they would come by, and we go over everything, and we kept trying to work to get better. And then eventually, Tom Orzechowski would start lettering my stuff. Tom was the letterer and editor in the beginning for Spawn. He did the Spawn
Nice.
logo and all that kind of stuff, uh, and then Jim Starlin, the creator of Thanos and half the Guardians of the Galaxy. Uh, Al Milgram, I guess Firestorm, and he was an editor at Marvel like forever, and
Mm-hmm.
and an inker and everything.
Right.
We'd get together, and we were sending the newsletter out like every month. My father kind of half subsidized it, although we did charge money to send the newsletter out, but it was like, subscription, for 10 copies was like $1 or something like that. So it
Right.
wasn't like
Right.
we were making gangbuster money or anything. And we just used that to go get it printed and put it out.
Sure.
Uh, uh, and suddenly we started getting work from Sam Della Rosa and John Workman and Bernie Wrightson and Mike Kaluta, and it just kept growing as far as work. And then there came a point when we had a couple of reporters that were reporting on things that they heard from other swap shows or the swap shows, comic shop swap shows, and
Right.
uh, and they would report on stuff like that. And then one day we got a letter from Roy Thomas. And Roy was saying, stop all that, let me give you the real scoop, So I started calling him up. And if you know anything about Roy Thomas, back then he talked about, 20 miles a minute. He was a really fast talker, but I take as much in terms of notes as I could, and we put
Okay.
it in the newsletter. And then I call him up and say, "So what did you think? You got the newsletter? What did you think?" He said, "You missed half of what I told you." And so some of the stuff would end up in the next newsletter. And we started sending around and swapping newsletters with like Paul Levitz, who had the comic reader. It was crazy. And we all made a pact with one another as we got a little older, and we started feeling like we were pretty good. And conventions were going, so we would end up going to conventions, or we, pop up at artists' houses. We find out where they lived, and we go visit them. Me and Greg Theakston and my brother Desmond used to do that quite frequently once I got to driving. And, so we went to visit Russ Heath, who was in Chicago. And, I was trying to convince my father that this was a great field for me to get into. He was kind of going along with it because he liked seeing me draw and everything because he was an
Sure.
aspiring artist. But, and he was the one that kind of pointed me in that direction because I started off wanting to be a film director. And
Oh,
he took
okay.
me, yeah. And I said, I want to be a film director, Dad. This is at 14 or 15. And my dad wasn't quite buying it. We went to a big department store called Hudson's in Detroit.
Hmm.
And it was huge. It was like, 15 floors of stuff. But the eighth floor or the seventh floor was all electronics and stuff. So I tried to get him to get me I guess you call it a 8 millimeter camera. Wasn't even a Super
Hmm.
8, film camera. And I talked him into it enough where we went downtown, we went upstairs. You got the sales guy. The sales guy was kind of stupid, didn't know how to sell anything. And my father said, he pulled his wallet out and he started opening it up. How much is this camera? And the guy gave him a price, and my father decided not to open the wallet. And the guy started selling him by, oh, it's got plenty of features. If you buy these lights, and if you buy this tripod, and if you buy this film, and if you buy this and that, and then you're gonna need audio, so you need an audio recorder. you know, these phones are just great. You can do all that with one piece of
One button.
device.
Yeah.
But he wanted me to buy all this stuff. But he was talking to my father, and I could see my father slowly putting his wallet back into his pocket. And as he said, and you're going to need a projector. That it suddenly occurred to me, pipe up, tell him something. I said, you know what? I don't need a projector. I'm going to show what I'm going to do at school. So he says, okay, well, you're still going to need a mic. And this is one of the best mic. I don't need the best mic. I'm going to do silent films, Dad. Let me
Would do silent
just give me,
films.
give me the projector, give me the camera. And my father said, okay, I'll get the camera. But then he turned around and said, uh, the, you know, he being the salesman said, well, with that projector, you're going to need to buy film. And my father said, well, how much is a film? He said, well, we sell it by the foot. And my father was like, put the doggone thing away. We went back home. He put me in front of the kitchen table, brought me a stack of typing paper about that thick and some number two pencils, and said, when you can draw your stuff and it's understandable and people like it, then I'll buy you the film camera. Well, this went on for years. I kept doing drawings, doing stories, bringing them to him. He said, I don't know if this is good enough. He said, you probably need a second opinion. I said, my art teacher says it's pretty good. He said, that's your art teacher. Your art teacher is supposed to encourage you. My aunt said, he said, well, your aunt, she's family. She's going to support you. She doesn't know
She's
what a good line
biased.
is between. It was terrible. I couldn't get it done. And finally, I'm working at Marvel in DC with the help of Rich Buckler and all these guys that I worked with to get good. And I get my first job. I go and take my first comic book, which was Iron Fist, to him. It wasn't the first book I did, but it was the first book that was published. I put it out in front of him, and he says, "Wow, this is great. I guess you can afford your own stuff now."
That's a great story. I guess you can afford your own stuff now. Smart
Yeah,
dad.
yeah. Put me on a quest, though.
Sure.
I met Frank Frazetta at a convention, Stranko, Al Williamson. They all gave me tips and lessons, and I kept running into people that knew some stuff I didn't know, so they became my friends. Anybody that had a portfolio and could draw decently was my friend, like Keith Pollard and Aubrey Bradford, and like I said, Starlin and Milgram, and all these people. It was Mike Nasser,
You know,
later called Netzer.
your story, Arvell, reminds me of something that I've discovered by interviewing other artists and other
Mhm.
creative type of people is that when they meet a young person who's even remotely interested in what they're doing, they're willing to give back and hey, this is what check this out. And what if you tried, especially with an artist, what if you tried drawing it like this? Or what if you use this for shading or things along those lines? And I've always found that to be really interesting that artists and creators are so willing and wanting to help out the next generation of
Mhm.
artists. Which
Yeah.
reminds me that you've been working and teaching and mentoring other artists at the comic art workshop.
Yeah.
That's something you've been working on for a long time. So what does it mean to you to be a teacher and a mentor for those who are coming up, like you were obviously taught and mentored by these other
Mhm.
artists?
You know, there was a phenomenon that occurs when you meet somebody that's got an interest in what you do, but thinks they can never do it. And when you start showing them, how to do stuff, and and I found this when I started the workshop uh, with my buddy Keith Pollard and uh, this one of the guys I went to high school with, Anthony Bacon, who was teaching art, is that there's a little spark that happens, and when the kids start to get it, their eyes brighten up. It's like they've been sleepwalking, and all of a sudden they're all intense. There's an intense look that comes across their face, which for some reason supercharges you to try to continue to help them as you see them getting ready to launch their mission. And I always love seeing that spark. That's the exciting part of being a teacher. And people did that for me, and I could see how they would chuckle, and I remember the first couple of times I came to Marvel, and John Romita would sit down. He was the art director, at Marvel at the time, and he would sit down and look at my work, and give me critiques, and I'm like, yeah, soaking it in. John Romita is giving me art tips,
Right.
I felt like I'd met one of the Beatles or something back then. I mean, can you imagine Ringo Starr teaching you how to play the drums? That's how I felt,
Sure. Yeah.
and it sort of charges you up. And uh, I'd say Ramita once said, "Well, thank you. You just made my job more interesting. It made me feel like I'm doing something rather than just doing these little silly cartoons.
Oh, that's cool.
So, and I didn't understand how he thought he was getting something out of it. But then when I started doing it, I said, oh yeah, you kind of do get something out of it. So yeah.
That's very cool. All right. Now your wife was kind enough to send me a bunch of links of stuff that you had
Mm-hmm.
done and both inside the art world and then things outside of the art world. But one of the links that kind of caught my attention, and this is something that I missed out on, and I'm a little disappointed in it. But back in 2021, after the year that wasn't, there was a
Mm.
lot of your work on display at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so that would have been an exhibit. My family and I, we love the Henry Ford Museum anyway. It's great
Yeah.
for Michigan history. It's a nice slice of Americana, all those different types of things. But one of the things that I thought would be interesting from your point of view, and I'm hoping that this is something you can expound on. What was it like for you to walk through that exhibit, seeing all your work up on the walls around you, and the number of people who were there to see it and who were touched by your work?
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, Tim, but I couldn't make it because of the pandemic.
Ah, okay,
Yeah, and I was taking care of a couple of elder people, so
sure,
I didn't make that show. But I've done a few of those. I was a instructor at the College of Creative Studies,
okay,
so I certainly enjoyed, and I did a couple of gallery showings, and I was a little bit of a fine artist at one point too, doing watercolors and stuff like that. I just enjoyed it all. I look at it as art, and it was a different experience. I did do a gallery showing with just comic art. It was about a year or two ago.
okay.
Uh, and it was great seeing all these people come through and look at the work. But it was no different than when I'm, at a comic book convention, sitting at my table showing my work, and people come up and flip through my stuff. And so it's fun, and it does kind of boost the ego when people come up to you and say, "Wow, your work is amazing," and or people come up to you and say, "Did you draw that?" See, this is my table. That's my name in the banner behind me, and
I just
yeah,
grabbed
I
random
did
pictures, threw them on the table. No big deal.
it. Yeah, I drew this, and they say, "Really?" I said, "You act like you don't believe me." You know. I said, I also worked on the movie poster for the Black Panther, and they said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Well, let me show you on my phone." I have to show them my work progress and everything. I said, "Okay, we get it." No, no, no. You wanted to know. So,
You wanted proof. Here we go,
yeah,
buddy.
you want the proof, so you gonna sit through all this proof I got on my phone.
Oh, I love
Well,
it.
I got my kids have wandered off. I don't care. You question my my integrity.
Right.
So yeah, we
Pull up a
oh,
chair, sucker. We got time.
yeah. I'm here all day. You should. Now I challenge people when they say, "So you don't believe me, do you?" And they go, "No, we believe you." I said, "No, just tell me. Tell me you don't believe me. Go ahead. I dare you." And other artists around me who have been around me in the past say, "Don't do that."
See, I'd do it just so you'd show me all the cool pictures. So
Oh yeah, well, you're welcome to stop by my table one day and check it out.
next year at Monroe, I will stop by and challenge you. So
Yeah, 'cause I got shots of you know quite a few even celebrities that and the one celebrity that played the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman,
oh,
and the
nice.
raw photo reference shots and stuff that we had to. Yeah, I got that stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, speaking of the Black Panther, and you kind of helped lead into another question I was going to ask you.
Hmm.
So look at you just setting them up, and so I can knock them down. I love it. All right. So we talked about some of the creative characters that you helped put together for the shows on Netflix.
Hmm.
But your artwork, like you said, also appeared in posters for the Black Panther movie. How gratifying is it to you to see your artwork elevated to these bigger audiences, like the Netflix audience, and then of course Black Panther exploded on the big screen with the MCU and the performance by the aforementioned and forever lost Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great. When I met, and then you meet some of these people. I went to the red carpet for the Luke Cage series. Me and Tony Isabella. That was great.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Standing next to all these, Rosario Dawson put her arms around me and gave me a big hug as she spun me around so she could get between me and Michael Calder so
Oh,
she could take some
nice.
pictures. But she did put her hands on me, and my wife was there, and I said, "See, she can't keep her hands off of me. You better treat me right."
Nice. I think
Yeah,
I probably would have had the same reaction. Yeah, I get it.
yeah. No, when she put her arms around me from behind, so I didn't know. I said, "Whose arms are these around?" Ooh, this. and uh, and then I looked one way, and she looked. She put her head the other way. I went like this, and her head went that way, and I went like this, and her head went the other way. And then finally, she let me catch her, and I said, I almost turned to my wife and said, I guess we're getting a divorce." But then she spun me around so fast. I can actually, and I got a vivid imagination, but before I could get through half of the fantasy, she was already in front of me talking to Michael Calder. That's kind of how it went.
Understood. Well, you're paid for
Yeah,
that
but
imagination,
you
so
want to ask me how what did it feel like?
Yeah. So what was it like
This
for
is a
you
family
personally?
show, right? You did tell me this was a family show, so I can't go into what it felt like.
Oh, so okay, but how about professionally? What was it like for you to have your artwork and things elevated to these higher stages?
I wanted more money for doing what I do.
Fair enough.
I think my funding needed to go up after that.
I appreciate that response. Yeah, I can get
No, I,
behind
I
that.
was I was thrilled. I the patron's sake, Kirby. I give homage to him any chance I get because he started me down this road, and
Sure.
I'm sure he started a lot of kids and folks down that road. But I always thank him because my wife says, I never would have imagined when I met you that we would be, going all these places and meeting all these people. And, you know, uh, she was very excited too. It was either that or she liked meeting Michael Calder, who gave her a big hug. And,
I'd like to meet Michael
oh,
Calder, so I get it. Yeah. Probably for
yeah,
different reasons, but yeah, all the
yeah.
same.
Well, she still stays with me. She once gave me the speech when we were about to get married. She says she was working as a congressional assistant actually, before that, when we first met, she was working as a senatorial assistant for Senator Carl Levin. And then from
Oh,
there,
okay.
she moved on to work for Congressman George Crockett. Um, and so she was kind of successful. I was working at a TV station at that point, so she would let me hang around her because I was kind of media. Although all I did was draw serial killers while I was at the station and do news graphics. But yeah, I guess maybe that counted. She got to meet some of the reporters and things at the annual Christmas party or the picnic, the company picnic. So
Sure.
you know, but she once told me that I needed to be as successful as she was. And so for a while I was on trial. She said, "Well, we'll hang out together, see how it goes." And of course, the movies weren't happening at that time, you know, back in the '80s or
Oh
anything like
yeah.
that. Although I
Yeah.
did work on the Superboy TV series, I worked on the opening for the
Oh, I didn't know
second
that.
season of Superboy. Yep,
That's
the
cool.
brothers. Yep, because the production manager moved from local TV to Universal Studios and started working with them on that.
Okay.
So that was cool. So she was a little impressed by that, but she hung around me because I had that potential. And then when Luke Cage and the Defenders and Iron Fist happened, and she kept seeing my name as on the very last slide of the American credits, you know, second name at the top if anybody wants to check. Uh, she was impressed and decided to keep me.
There you
So
go.
yeah, so to answer your question, it was beneficial professionally and personally that that I was a comic book artist and I drew comic books for a living.
I think so.
Mhm. And I could remain a kid. I'm
Well, that's half the fun right
yeah,
there. Is being able
yeah,
to, yeah, the body might not be keeping up, but inside we're all still 13, 14 years old in the
hmm
head. That's what I
yeah,
keep thinking anyway.
yeah,
So my body keeps getting older, but my brain keeps staying as a
mm,
teenager with all mostly the same interests. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. I'm kind
young
of
at
the
heart.
same way. My body is just now starting to fall apart, but up until a year ago, I was as spry as I ever was. But of course, I fell down that flight of steps. That didn't help.
I would think not. No.
But
All right.
anyway,
So all
we
right. So
digress.
Arvell,
hmm
here's a question for you because as a Michigan native, and
hmm
every time I've seen you, you've had a hat that looks well something similar to this, a lion's hat on your head. I think there we go. You got one on right
Yeah,
now. See,
yeah.
uh,
Sometimes it's a
Mich-
tiger.
sometimes it's tiger. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time I've run into you, that you've had a Lions hat on your head, and I know that you're a Lions fan, and you've endured many seasons of our lovable Lions. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
as a sports fan and as a Michigan native, how excited are you right now for the 2024 Lions?
I am super excited for both the Lions and the Tigers. And when I worked at the local TV station, they would come in the station, and I get to meet them. So
Right?
the day Billy Sims came in, I went, "Hey, don't I know you?" Yeah, they would do interviews and things, so that was kind of cool. So I actually see Isaiah Thomas. I'd see all of the sports
That's cool.
guys. I even saw Gordie Howe. I
Nice.
didn't. Yeah, so it was cool. Somebody had to introduce me, and this is Gordie Howe, and I said, "And," because I didn't follow hockey at the time.
Nice
I
to
went,
meet you, Mr.
"And."
Howe. And where where's that Billy Sims guy again?
Yeah, yeah, just all of them, and
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm pretty excited for this as well.
yeah, I'm excited.
It's been a fun couple years underneath Dan Campbell, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else what else they can bring to the table for us. So,
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
all right,
Um,
Arvel, we're up to what I like to call our silly question. So we ask this of everybody who's on the show.
mhm.
So Arvell Jones, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Well, I was always, probably everybody says, you know, um, a T Rex, but you know, I don't know. I just like the big teeth and the little hands. He's got everything he can do to. So I guess that's my favorite dinosaur. Plus, Jack Kirby drew him as the devil dinosaur.
There you go. All right, that's a great reason to pick the T Rex. All right,
Yeah.
I can
So
get behind that.
yeah, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Arvell, thank you so much for being on the FSF Podcast today. Where can our listeners and viewers go to find out about more about you, your work, anything else you've got coming up?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram and Facebook because it's just my name, Arvell Jones.
Okay.
Uh, so that's pretty easy. I have a website. It's Arvell Art or arvelljones.com. Whichever, arvellart.com or arvelljones.com, all one word. Uh, I'm working on some secret projects, but also have some projects coming up, and I'm hoping Tim, you will invite me on when we're ready to talk about those.
I
Uh,
would love to have you back on.
yeah, because I got one right over here. It's all printed and everything, and it's ready to go. And I will give you a quick sneak. Oh, I guess I can't, but it's a huge. Oh, you can't even see it, right? Because it's off the screen. But it's a huge, great looking comic that everybody's gonna love when they see it. But by one of my former apprentices and students that
Nice.
the workshop, and I've got about three of them that are coming out. Plus, I had my own, but I don't have it in arm's reach, so I'm not gonna go and reach for it. And
Okay.
then, but one day we can do that. And then, since it's a family show, I won't show you the dirty pictures I got from John Romita and a few other people that handed me some stuff. But I got them right in arm's reach, right here. But I promised John I wouldn't show him until after he died. But this is a family show, so I can't show those to you
There
right
you
now.
go.
Yeah.
All right, Arvell, we'll make sure that we put those links down in the show notes down below so that
Yeah.
everybody knows where to find you and where they can hopefully in the future look for those interesting pics from John.
No, well, that'll never be posted. It'll never be posted. But
Never to be posted. Fair enough.
yes, yes. But I'll just tell you, it was of Mary Jane. But
All right,
one
guys.
day you and I will get together,
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
We'll
I'd like that.
share, yeah. We will share a brewski because I don't drink. So you can do the brewski.
Fair enough.
I'll show you my blue portfolio.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It is blue. Aptly named, I'm sure. All right, guys, want to remind everybody that subscribing is the single most important thing you can do to help our show continue to grow. Get amazing guests like Arvell here to come on, talk with us, and and just have some of these great stories and things to listen to. So please subscribe. It helps out more than we can ever really just tell you and describe. And again, Arvell, thank you for coming on the show. And yeah, guys, go check out his work as well. You will not be disappointed. He has some amazing, and I do mean amazing artwork out there. I am always floored by how good his stuff is. So, and on that note, we will say goodbye and thank you for watching the FSF Podcast. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Copyright 2024 FSF Podcast. Reference any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.